Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video in my Good Idea, Bad Idea series. This is a series where I talk about upcoming content or suggestions, and explain both the good sides and the bad sides of things to give you enough information for you to decide if it's a good idea or a bad idea. In this video, I want to bring up the suggestion of character-wide artifact power. And when I say character-wide, I mean that for all artifact power that you get, you can spend it all separately in each one of your class specializations. For example, if you get a plus 1000 AP item, you can put 1000 points into Frost, 1000 into Fire, and another 1000 into Arcane. So now that I've given you the suggestion, let's start with the good. One of the big problems I mentioned in the previous video of the series, which was the Legendary Vendor video, was that there's so much investment into specs this expansion, so much so that people are getting locked into them. And I think it's a combination of a few things. I think the most major one is those spec-specific legendaries, but another factor is the fact that all artifact power you get is locked to whatever spec you are at the time of gaining it. Up until this expansion, Blizzard has implemented many different features to make maintaining multiple specs easier. To name the most major ones, we used to have dual talent specialization, which is now changed to where you can pick any spec you want at any time you want at no cost. We also have all gear excluding trinkets changing their stats to match whatever spec you're in, and so on. So the fact that artifact power is tied to just one artifact seems counterproductive in this aspect, I think. And a big problem, and this is something I mentioned in that Legendary Vendor video, but I'll mention again since it's important, and that's the fact that all of this character investment adds up so much to the point to where even class balance changes are turning into huge deals now. Class buffs and nerfs are obviously very common and integral to the game, but as I'm sure you've seen with the recent 7.1.5 changes, there's a big hullabaloo about X class getting buffed and Y class getting nerfed. I think this reaction is pretty common with any class change, but it's getting worse and worse because people are spending months on getting these spec-specific legendaries, building artifact power, and then all of a sudden they take a 20% hit in DPS or whatever the case may be. Or perhaps their spec gets their gameplay changed too much to where they don't enjoy it anymore, and the only option is to stick through it with that spec or start over your legendary grind and start pumping AP into another artifact. While I think the more major culprit of this problem are those spec-specific legendaries, I think making artifact power character-wide may placate it, at least to some degree. Having more options is always good, and it gives people more freedom to adjust and adapt for whatever future patches may bring. But that's about it for the good side of things, I guess. Now let's get to the bad. I think the biggest downside to this idea is the fact that there is some value in that satisfaction of getting more out of focusing on one spec, and this idea definitely diminishes that. And it kind of goes with the idea that everybody should have everything, which is a mentality that I don't really agree with, I guess. There are so many things in the game that simplify or otherwise automate so many aspects of the game, and this would be just another thing to add to the pile. Plus, we already sort of have a system in place for this, and that's the artifact knowledge. If you decide you want to try another specialization, you will be far behind your main spec, but you won't be starting over from scratch. Another point to consider, and this harkens back to that satisfaction of getting more out of focusing on one spec, is that if you do decide to switch and AP is indeed character-wide, you'll be putting in like 30 points into an artifact that you've never used before, and it's going to be overwhelming for a lot of people. Getting these traits slowly gives you a better gradual understanding of your specialization, and is something I think is important to keep in mind. So taking that into account, if you're maybe on the fence, another option is instead of making the AP 100% character-wide, make it something like 50% character-wide. For example, if I gain 1000 AP as Arcane spec, both Fire and Frost spec would get 500 each. This might be a good middle-of-the-road option, and if you want to vote in the poll, I'll have an option for that. So it's hard to say. As always, there's good sides and bad sides. For me personally, having that freedom of switching to any spec I want more easily overrides the bad sides. But I think the bad idea voters can have a strong argument as well. My vote will be going towards that partial sharing, but that's just me. If you disagree with me, that's fine. As always, if you want to cast your vote, I'll have a link to that poll in the description. Speaking of polls, I do have the results of that Legendary Vendor video. There was a lot of activity on this poll, which is great. If you recall, I suggested the idea of allowing us to break down legendaries into a dust, and then use that dust to buy a legendary of our choice at a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio. So basically, you can convert 2 or 3 legendaries into one if you really want a specific one. We had a total of 1,657 votes, with 1,196 saying it was a good idea, 358 saying it was a bad idea, and 103 were indifferent. So pretty interesting stats here. As always for these, I do like to bring up a comment that I considered to be a highlight for the winning vote. I think this comment by Nerfmate summarized everybody's frustrations pretty well here. He says that sometimes situations come up where people put in a lot of time running raids, mythics, and etc. Basically anything that gives a legendary, and sometimes just because you have bad luck, you never get the one you really want. There's no comparison for some of the legendaries that increase your damage versus some of the ones that increase your utility. Putting more work into your character should be what determines how well you perform and not your luck with a dice roll. Nerfmate says that while RNG will always be a part of a good loot table system, the way they currently have these legendaries set up is way over the top. So make of that as you will. Personally, I'm on the side of good idea for this subject, but once again, that's just me. You're entirely free to have your own opinion, and I encourage you to express it as long as it's in a constructive way. But that's about all I have for you, I guess. Whether you agree with the idea or not, I hope you found this video helpful. Give it a like if you liked it, and if you really liked it, let me know in the comments and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching, good luck, and peace.